Good morning, YouTube. Let's discuss whether you should finance or pay cash for a supercar.
So are you recording all of the nefarious activities?
If you're new to the channel, my name is Dan, this is my garage, and this channel is all about the supercar ownership experience. And like I said, today we're going to talk about cash versus finance. So this is one of those ongoing debates, and there's varying opinions about it. And there's not anything that says that necessarily one is better than the others based on your personal needs. But before we get into that, real quick, if you can do me a favor and go visit normalguysupercar.com. That is my website where I sell supercar parts and services. That is how I keep this channel running. Thank you so much to all of you that do that. All right, so we're trying out this new little portable mic. It's actually wireless, so we'll see if it works. If it distracts you guys, let me know. But anyway, so one of the common debates that happens on these videos that I produce is people say, oh, did you finance it? And then of course you get the people who always say, oh, if you can't afford to pay cash, don't buy it, and all those sorts of things. Sometimes that's true, sometimes that's not. So I want to go over the math behind why I actually believe most of the time I think financing makes sense. And I actually am going to give you some real world examples based on my own experience. So I actually, if you didn't know, have this 458 right here. I am financing this car, but I have another Ferrari. I have a 599 that I paid cash for. So we're going to discuss the math behind that, and you'll see that it's not always as simple as it seems. So the first thing that we're going to discuss is the interest rates. So if you finance a car, the interest rates are, in my opinion, the most important thing. Now, with supercars in general, you can get kind of traditional car financing depending on your credit, depending on your relationship with your bank. So I have a long-term relationship with my credit union, University Federal Credit Union. I have financed, I'm gonna say, like 5 or 6 cars to them. So they know me pretty well. I've never missed any payments. And so when I contact them about buying a car through them, it's pretty simple. In fact, I got a guy.
I got a guy that does this. I got a guy that does that. I got a guy that make your problems go away with a bat.
You know, it's one of those things where, like, I call my guy. I don't actually call them. I call my guy. And he knows all about me, and he knows my history, he knows what I do for a living, so he plugs it into the computer, and literally within 5 minutes, he's usually like, hey, you're approved, here's your interest rate, how long of duration do you want, so on and so on. So literally when I was buying my truck, it was just a 5-minute phone call, and then it was like, here's your interest rate, how long of the loan do you want, and here's your payment, and have fun, go buy the truck. But that's the other thing. I have excellent credit score, and the reason I bring that up is because your credit score is going to help determine what interest rate you get. Now, my personal belief is anytime the interest rates are below 3%, I think you should finance. And the reason I say that is because the amount of interest that you're going to accrue on the loan is less than how much money you could probably make if you took that same cash and invested in something else. Now, to get these low interest rates, for example, on these cars, they usually want 20% down for these kind of expensive cars. Now, that's not necessarily true for like the Mini, for example, although we did put a substantial amount of money down, way more than 20%, because we traded in Meg's old car. And the same thing for the truck, I put a substantial amount of money down. But you know, a lot of these automotive loans have like 0 down and that sort of stuff. But that's fine in some cases, but you know, on a depreciating asset, that's a big risk, because if the car gets totaled, you might be upside down on it. So that's my goal, is I want to be in a position where I've never ever upside down on the car. I want to at any moment be able to sell a car, get rid of it, and not have to come to the table with money. So putting 20% down is generally a good idea. On a supercar, again, it gets a little bit weird, because depending how old the supercar is, it may not actually be a depreciating asset, or if it is depreciating, it's depreciating really, really slowly. This car right here, we bought brand new. This thing's gonna lose a crap ton of money in the first few years, and we're fine with that because we have no intentions of selling this car until it has maybe 100 and something thousand miles, probably 5, 6, 7 years from now. So really, we don't care that it's necessarily gonna be a depreciating asset, and that's fine. So speaking of interest rates, you know, if you look at the cars I have, every single car that I have a loan on, my loan is less than 2%. So let's do a little hypothetical. Let's say you take out a $100,000 loan on a $120,000, $130,000 car, whatever. You go out and you buy a Ferrari F430, you put 20% down, let's say the car is $120,000, so you financed about $100,000. Let's say you get 2%. Well, over the duration of the loan, depending how long you're gonna do it, you're only going to accrue a couple $1,000s in interest. So we go back to the adage of everyone says, oh, pay cash, pay cash. Okay, so let's say you pay cash and you take that $100,000 and you put it on the car and you pay it off completely instead of getting a loan. Okay, great. Well, that $100,000 is now just depreciating. The $100,000 you put into that car, is depreciating. You are not getting any interest on it. So in the end game, when you sell the car, you've lost more money on that $100,000 than if you took that $100,000 and invested it. And that's what really is my motivation behind why I try and keep my cash available to me. All right, so let's go through my cars as real world examples. So like I said, this car, I financed my 599, I paid cash. Now, why did I do that? And it was very intentional, just to be clear. So this car, I do not intend to sell this car pretty much ever. I want to keep this car until I die. I hope to have it for over 100,000 miles, and then people are going to be like, that's crazy, and all that sort of stuff. That's my goal with this car. So that cash, I would rather have on hand because I'm going to be having this car forever. There's no reason for me to tie up that cash on this asset. It just doesn't make sense. The 599, the intention was to buy that car and then flip it immediately. So in that particular case, it made a lot of sense to pay cash. Why? Because I didn't want the hassle of having the title bound up in a lien. So that actually was more of my concern. Was initially we thought we were going to sell a car in 1 to 2 months. Well, it's been 9. So, in hindsight, I would kind of rather have that cash available, but alas, it's not. It's tied up in that car. And that's kind of the problem here. So I put the cash on that car, paid it off entirely, bought it cash, and we were trying to flip it, and then we haven't yet. Because of that, I now could not use that cash for other things and make more money on it. And that's been really frustrating because in those 9 months, I could have used that cash many, many times. Believe me, between getting involved in Gated 6, I would have loved to have some of that cash available to maybe purchase some of the parts we get so that I could then pay myself back. But instead, I had to go pursue outside investment, and that ended up costing me way more money. So think about this in this real world scenario. I tied up my money. That same amount of money is almost exactly the same amount of money that we need to raise from investors to build our F430 kits. We are now paying those investors back a reasonably large sum of money. Let's just say it's $20,000. It's not, but let's just say it is. $100,000, we're paying back $120,000, so we're losing $20,000. If I had taken that $100,000, instead of putting it on the car, let's say I was making payments that are on 2 or 3% interest, in those 9 months, we're talking probably less than $1,000. So I would have been net positive $19,000 if I'd had that cash available and been able to use it on my company instead of using it on this car. So these are the sorts of things why I say you should have your cash available to you. So if you're getting an atrocious interest rate, let's say you have bad credit or you can't put the money down or whatever, and you get some crazy interest rate like 7-8%, probably don't want to be making those sorts of interest payments over a long duration because that's going to get quite expensive and quite painful. And there's an entire possibility that if you're not putting enough money down, that you're going to be upside down in the car, and that brings up other problems as well. So ultimately, my thing's been, I want my cash available to use it as I need it, not tie it up into an asset. Let's say worst case scenario, I lose my job, my company collapses, Meg gets fired or something like that, and we have no income for a while. I can walk away from that loan from the bank. They're gonna take my car. I might lose some money in equity that I have in the car, but I'm now freed up from having that liability. Yeah, it's gonna hurt my credit, but at that point, is it better to hurt my credit and lose that asset, or to have to go bankrupt and basically have no money to survive? I know that's kind of a worst case scenario and it's unlikely to happen, but if we had the cash available and that sort of crazy situation happened where we both lose our jobs, we have no income, we now have some cash where we can keep ourselves afloat for a while. And this kind of did actually happen for us. When I got laid off, we had to reassess our current cash situation. And because we've been kind of keeping as much cash available, or I shouldn't even say cash, right? We have it in investments. I never really like cash. I don't want it just sitting in a checking account or a savings account. I want it working for me. I want to invest in something, but I want it in fairly liquid investments. So whether it's stocks or bonds or mutual funds, because as soon as you start tying it up into harder to obtain assets, for example, real estate, that's hard to get that money out of. My personal theory is when it comes to large assets like that, you don't want to tie up your cash in them as much as possible. You want the bank to take as much of that risk as possible. You want to keep your cash on hand to be able to do other things with it. That's really what it comes down to, is by having this cash available, you are freed up to pursue other interests, and you're not stuck just with this car and not being able to use that money for anything else. Yes, you could technically go get you know, like a title loan against the car, impulsive cash out of the car, but those are probably going to come with really bad interest rates, so I don't think you necessarily want to do that. So ultimately, what this really comes down to, it's kind of a personal preference. If you don't feel comfortable having a loan on these cars, well then don't. If you feel comfortable having a loan on the car and you get a good interest rate, well then go for it. I think this hard rule that everyone says, don't buy these cars unless you have the cash for it, is kind of silly. The other thing I've heard is don't buy one of these cars unless you had the total amount of cash necessary to buy it outright. I think that's reasonable to say. I think that's more reasonable than paying cash for it, because ultimately you're kind of buying a 100% optional expense in your life. You know, it's not like your point A to point B vehicle. This is purely for fun. It is just not necessary. So you should have a lot of excess cash and a lot of excess income in order to really purchase a car that is completely unnecessary. That's more of my thinking on that is, yes, you should have lots of cash available, not necessarily because you need to be able to buy the car outright. The other thing is, of course, you know, a lot of these cars do have expensive maintenance costs. So I do think it's important to plan your budget accordingly. And I think that's more of the important thing that most of these people are missing out on is you need to do your homework and you need to know what you're getting into. And that goes for any vehicle or any major purchase. You should have a good plan and know your finances well enough to know, can I actually afford this? And that goes especially true for things like a house, but certainly it goes very true for things like an expensive car. Because if you jump into this car and you have no idea what you're doing and all of a sudden you're getting some massive maintenance bill or something that was unexpected and you don't have the means to pay for it, well, that's going to be a problem. Yes and no again, because again, it's an optional vehicle. Let's say you do buy this car and let's say it does have some catastrophic failure and the DCT transmission blows up and suddenly you're getting a bill for $20,000 or $30,000. So you might think to yourself, well, I don't want to pay for that right now. I'm going to wait a few months and save up some money and get in a better position financially. So this car is just going to sit. Okay, that doesn't really harm you because, you know, it's just sitting. That's the thing that I think people forget about. It's not like your daily driver. You don't have to have the car functioning. In fact, this car has literally had times where it sat for months because, well, during COVID, nothing was happening. And I had nothing to work on with it. And I was waiting for parts to come in. So it sat in the garage for like 2 months and didn't get driven. And it had zero impact on me financially. So I think that's more of the thing you have to consider. There's way more to these situations that I think people try and simplify. There's no hard, fast rules. You got to look at what makes sense for you, what makes sense for your finances, and what's going to work out best financially, which again, it may not be ultimately the last, you know, like squeezing every last dollar out of it that you can. It may be what are you the most comfortable with. Well, again, if you happen to want to support this channel, go check out normalguysupercar.com. Use the code NGS10. It takes off 10% almost everything in the store. And even more importantly, if you like this video, feel free to subscribe and hit that like button. Those things genuinely do help out my channel, so thank you so much. I do appreciate it tremendously to all of you that have been watching my channel for years now. So thank you so much. It's kind of amazing that we've been doing this for that long, and I recognize many of you in the comments now. It's kind of funny. We have more car stuff coming your way, so we're gonna keep doing some cool videos. You're gonna wanna stay tuned. It's gonna be sweet.